Hello, I'm David Borys, returning to present Part 3, our final part of the red-green axis. This is an axis that is both violent and subversive, specifically designed to destroy America through an insurgency. Remember in Part 1, we reviewed some of the historical links that gave birth to this insurgency. In Part 2, we took a close look at the Black Lives Matter movement, along with Antifa, as well as the funding they received from George Soros and numerous other sources to include corporate America. Now in Part 3, we'll look at some of the consequences of the insurgency. Again, these presentations are sponsored by Sharia Crime Stoppers, an entity of United West. Let's take another look at how the long march through the institutions that Antonio Gramsci introduced is proceeding. We'll begin with how all mention of the Islamic threat has been purged from federal law enforcement and national security training. Remember, the Muslim Brotherhood has said their goal is to eliminate America through sabotage with our help. The trigger for the purge occurred in October 2011 when a letter was sent to John Brennan, one of Obama's national security advisors. The letter was sent by Farhana Carrera, demanding that all training be purged. Carrera was the executive director of the Muslim Advocates, an entity of the Muslim Brotherhood. The response to her demands to purge our Islamic threat training was immediate. The first to cave was the Department of Justice, through Dwight Holton, who said, training materials that portray Islam as a religion of violence or with a tendency towards violence are wrong. They are offensive and will not be tolerated. The next to cave was John Brennan himself, who directed all Department of Homeland Security training be purged. And finally, the last to comply with the Muslim Brotherhood's demands came from Martin Dempsey, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who purged all training throughout the military, all of its components to include the reserves and National Guard. All of what I've related and more is well documented in this September 2015 report issued by Judicial Watch. It also covers a meeting held by former FBI Director Robert Mueller with several senior Muslim Brotherhood officials in his office at the FBI headquarters in Washington, where he briefed them on the number of training documents reviewed and purged from use. There is only one conclusion from this. Returning to the current situation to defund police in our major cities, Representative Steve Green of Minnesota issued this warning in June 2020 concerning Antifa's partnership with local Muslims in Minneapolis to enforce Islamic law or Sharia within the city, a city that is the recruitment center for jihadists in the United States. Minneapolis already has at least one Sharia officer to enforce Islamic law among the Somalis living there. Rashid is originally from Walton, Georgia. Note the words on his shoulder patch. While in New York City now has Muslims community patrols that are well funded and well equipped, patrolling its city streets. Another consequence of the red-green axis is the level of destruction and the financial impact as a result of the public violence, looting, and arson that has impacted many of our cities, Portland being just one example. In fact, a recent study published by the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project concludes that up to 95% of riots in 2020 are linked to the Muslim Brotherhood's Black Lives Matter movement, with more violence being threatened against our law enforcement to come. Perhaps even more ominous is the recently reported link between Black Lives Matter and Communist China for funding. Speaking of links, one ticking time bomb that has received little attention is the Green Alliance with Mexican drug cartels and the insertion of jihadi sleeper cells across our southern border. The threat that is multifaceted, consisting of fake counterfeit medicine, opioids, and sex trafficking, along with armed sleeper cells of jihadists that are hiding in secret throughout the United States, waiting to be activated by Iran. So we can diagram the grand jihad against America like this. On the one hand are those who attack us through violence. On the other are those groups, entities, and individuals affiliated with the Muslim Brotherhood who use subversion to attack America. This is sometimes referred to as the soft jihad. But both are working together in partnership to seduce us and to terrorize us into capitulation. Well, we've been warned before. Only a coalition of Marxists and Islamists can destroy the United States. So said Carlos the Jackal. So according to Antonio Gramsci, our immune system is being attacked just like Joseph Stalin said. America is like a healthy body, and its resistance is threefold: its patriotism, its morality, and its spiritual life. If we can undermine these three areas, America will collapse from within. Remember, Antonio Gramsci is the founder of the socialist Marxist movement that we confront today. It targets key institutions of social order for destruction, all facilitated by the Democratic Party. So to review some of the important points that we've covered during this series, the red-green axis has turned violent and is clearly out in the open for all to see. It is financed by George Soros and corporate America, supported by the Muslim Brotherhood, that works in partnership with Black Lives Matter officials, along with Antifa followers, some of whom were trained by jihadists in the Middle East. All have large groups of armed, dedicated followers, encouraged by many progressives within the Democratic Party who are actively subverting the United States. To accomplish their aims, the Axis has many tools at their disposal. We've discussed the long march through the institutions led by 1960s and 70s student radicals who now constitute the swamp Trump is trying to drain, along with political correctness that targets and suppresses all opposition through repressive tolerance. While all segments of our society are attacked and replaced by the Marxization and Islamization of our culture, promoted by the Muslim Brotherhood through civilization jihad. And then there's critical race theory, authored by Derek Bell, that divides our society along racial lines, designated to divide and conquer America by claiming whites are racist or are oppressors while blacks are their victims. And then finally, a concept not covered within this presentation is the Cloward-Piven strategy to overload American society with entitlements, unfunded mandates, regulations, and free stuff to the point that our nation collapses. For the most part, the congressional leadership of the Republican Party has been silent, and the effects of the Purge continue with no acknowledgement that Islam represents a dire threat to America. Turning now to the Democrats very briefly, Joe Biden, seen here with his senior advisor for Muslim American engagement. His name is Farouk Mitha, is co-founder and former executive director of Engage USA, and is also a member of the United States Council of Muslim Organizations that represents a variety of Muslim Brotherhood front groups throughout the United States and helps to get people elected, their followers elected to public office throughout our country. Perhaps this is why Black Lives Matter and Antifa want to remove George Washington's statues for what he stands for. To God alone I kneel. Unfortunately, FBI agents recently took a knee, demonstrating in Washington, D.C., showing their solidarity and support for the very groups promoting anarchy in America. This concludes our three-part presentation of the red-green axis. To be sure, we have just scratched the surface, but hopefully you are now better equipped to recognize the forces that comprise the insurgency to destroy this country. If you desire more information about this, please don't hesitate to access the sites shown on the screen.